Welcome back to Outperform the Storm. I'm Martin Sordew, performance strategist. In the last episode, I unpacked the problem many founders and leaders won't admit they have: shadow burnout. They're still hitting the numbers, still showing up, still functioning, but internally, quietly, they're losing capacity. This episode is about what's on the other side of that challenge. It's clarity, sharpness, edge. The best version of you that shows up every time. Sustained edge is not intensity. Sustained edge is the ability to stay clear, calm, and dangerous, hour after hour without burning out. Not a peak, not a sprint, not a heroic week followed by 3 weeks of paying for it. Instead, a sustained edge. Over the past few years, the model of high performance has shifted, quietly, definitively, and without fanfare. The 2018 version of high performance was about intensity, hustle, outwork everyone, sleep when you're dead. The grind narrative had its religious moment, and many built identities around it. And then the pandemic happened, and in the years that followed that model broke. The ambition remained, but the assumption that more intensity equals greater performance crumbled. A generation of founders saw themselves and the people around them flame out, not from a lack of drive, but from the wrong operating model. And what's emerging now, and you can see it in the data, the research, the language people are starting to use, is a different version of high performance, a 2026 version, defined less by intensity and more by precision, less by hours and more by clarity, less by who can sustain the most pressure and more by who can stay clear-headed inside it. And that's the evolution. Today's high performer isn't the one with the most hours. It's the one whose nervous system still works at 4 p.m. on a Friday after a week from hell. The one who can think 2 moves ahead while everyone else is reacting. The one who is still cognitively sharp when the pressure should have shut them down. That capability has a name: sustained edge. And if you heard the last episode, this is the other side of the same coin. Shadow burnout names the price you're paying. Sustained edge defines what you need to win. I've spent the last 16 years coaching founders, leaders, lawyers, traders, and others operating at the highest end of pressure, people in roles where the consequences of dysregulation are significant. And during that time, I've seen a pattern. The ones who sustain, who are still operating at the top of their range 5, 10, 15 years in, are not the ones who work the hardest. They're not even the ones with the most discipline in the conventional sense, nor the ones with the most natural ability. They're the ones who've developed a way of operating that lets them perform at a high level consistently without causing and compounding mental and physical harm. Those who flame out at the second or third peak, who hit a level, then can't hold it and disappear, almost always have the same issue. They never built the hardware to carry the ambition. They ran intensity as their operating model, and it worked for a while until it didn't. The difference between the two groups is rarely talent. It's almost always regulation. And the people who learn that early are the ones who are still in the game decades later. I want to switch focus to a category of outperformers whose work has shaped a lot of how I think about sustained high performance. They're tier 1 special operators, the ones operating in hostile environments most of us will never face, real high consequence. And what's interesting is what these people are not. They're not loud, they're not aggressive, they're not running on intensity. They are composed, clear-headed, and sovereign in their own state. The pressure on the outside is not running the show on the inside. That's not personality, that's a trained capacity. And the reason they're worth paying attention to is not because what you do has anything in common with what they do, because it usually doesn't. It's because they are the most extreme example of the principle that the higher the stakes, the less intensity helps you, the more regulation matters. Composure is the operating state, selective force when force is required, restoration treated as part of the work, not an interruption to it. That's not a wellness model, it's a precision model, and it scales down to the boardroom, trading floor, fundraiser, and Founders Tuesday morning. Same physiology, different outcomes. So let's look at the 4 disciplines behind a sustained edge. If sustained edge is the desired outcome, this is what makes it possible. I'm not going to walk you through specific protocols today. That's a different conversation and one this podcast has focused on in detail in earlier episodes. What I am going to do is outline the strategy. Because once you see the strategy, the protocols make sense as instances of it. Without it, they're just techniques. So here are the 4 disciplines. The first is restoration as strategy. Not recovery as something you do when you've broken yourself. Restoration is what ensures that you don't break yourself in the first place. This is the inversion that most driven people get wrong. They treat restoration as remedial, and boy, have I done that time after time. Something you do when the wheels come off. The sustained edged approach treats it as the thing that keeps the wheels on. It's not the opposite of performance, it's the precondition for it. The second discipline is a regulated state as the default. Not regulation as a tool you reach for when things go sideways, regulation as the baseline that you operate from. You don't earn calm by getting through the storm. You bring calm into the storm. That's a different objective. The version of you that walks into the room is determined long before you get there by the state your nervous system has been living in for the previous hours, days, and weeks. That's not soft work. It's the most consequential work you can do. The third discipline is selective intensity. This was also featured in a previous episode, but I want to repeat it here with a different frame. Intensity is a real resource, but you have a finite amount of it, so the mistake is spending it indiscriminately. The people who hold a sustained edge have figured out that the discipline is not generating intensity, it's allocating it. They run hot when it matters, they don't run hot all day. That's not laziness, that's strategic firepower. The fourth and final discipline is state as the differentiator. In an environment where everyone has access to the same information, the same tools, the same AI, the differentiator is no longer access. It's the quality of the cognition that you bring, and the quality of your cognition is downstream the quality of your state. The composed person sees what the reactive person misses. That's not mystical, that's neurological. Your prefrontal cortex either has the resources to function or it doesn't. The composed person makes better decisions, holds complexity longer, recovers from setbacks faster, and reads the room with more precision. Not because they're a different kind of person, but because they're operating from a different kind of state. So sustained edge is the capacity to think clearly under pressure, the capacity to make solid decisions in conditions that should be pulling you into reaction. And it's the capacity to perform at the top of your range, not occasionally, not in your best week, but across years. Not quarters, but years. Not a peak that burns out by week 3, but a signal that compounds. It's the version of you that isn't dependent on adrenaline to be good, doesn't need a crisis to focus, and can hold the load for as long as the load needs to be held, and still be sharp at the end. That's the gain. You think clearly, you decide well, you perform at the top of your range, repeatedly, sustainably, without trading your capacity for one more good quarter. From shadow burnout to sustained edge, that's the transformation. I'm Martin Sordew. This is Outperform the Storm.